Moxie Media presents Safe Rigging Practices and Procedures for the Offshore Oil and Gas Industry. Part of Moxie's Guide to Safe Rigging Practices and Procedures series. Improper rigging practices have led to the deaths and injuries of many individuals working within the oil field industry. This is often due to support personnel such as riggers, roughnecks, and deckhands not knowing the correct method of securing certain loads, overloading rigging components beyond their lifting capacities, and getting caught between unpredictable moving loads. It is essential that riggers are familiar with the various rigging components and procedures for lifting loads and be able to classify and understand their capabilities. This instructional material is based on the American Petroleum Institute's recommended practices for operation and maintenance of offshore cranes, API RP2D. The American Petroleum Institute is the major United States national trade association representing the entire petroleum industry, exploration and production, transportation, refining, and marketing. This recommended practice is intended to serve as a guide to crane owners, operators, and riggers in developing operating and maintenance practices and procedures for use in the safe operation of pedestal-mounted revolving cranes on bottom-supported and floating offshore rigs and platforms. API RP2D has been incorporated by reference into MMS and U.S. Coast Guard codes of federal regulations and are enforceable by the laws of the United States. API RP2D is not the only requirement for offshore cranes worldwide. Many other key standards exist within Europe, Australia, and Southeast Asia. The majority of supplies and equipment that are the lifeblood of the offshore oil and gas industry are loaded onto and transported via offshore supply boats. When taking on cargo, it is the crew's responsibility to be aware of how the cargo is being loaded in order to maintain proper vessel stability. The captain and crew must be aware of what type of cargo is being loaded onto the boat and is to be present and responsible for directing loads in order to ensure stable ballast. The captain, using the cargo manifest, should have the cargo positioned on deck in accordance with rig or platform location to allow for ease in unloading. Position cargo that will be unloaded last at the front of the deck closest to the wheelhouse, and the cargo that will be unloaded first at the rear of the deck toward the stern. Suspended loads should never be passed over workmen. The load must be safely landed and properly blocked off before being unhooked and the slings taken off. Proper blocking keeps slings from becoming damaged and reduces the risk of a load toppling or rolling onto your feet when unslung. Crewmen will visually inspect third-party pre-slung lifting slings arriving at the facility prior to handling. Any questionable slings will be removed and the load will be handled utilizing approved inspected slings in good condition. Use only certified inspected slings to hoist equipment. Due to the extreme conditions of the offshore environment, chain is not used in lifting operations and should be avoided. The failure of just a single link of chain can result in a serious accident. A wire rope sling, on the other hand, can be composed of several hundred individual wires, all of which must fail for the rope to break. Another killer of riggers is electrocution. Although not common offshore, electrical lines can be located in the proximity of cranes at dockside facilities. If working within a boom's length to a power line, appoint a competent signal person and station him within sight of the operator to provide warning if any part of the crane or load approaches the safe minimum distance of at least 20 feet from a power line. Due to electricity's ability to arc at high voltages, the crane can become electrified just by approaching a power line too closely. Whenever possible, loads such as tubulars should be pre-slung, bundled, and secured in groups of safe numbers at the dock to minimize shifting hazards while rigging loads in seas and allow for a quick connection to the hook block. Cable-laid slings will be used only for handling of tubular items, and then only when using a choker hitch and bundling the load. No other uses of these slings are permitted. When not in use, store slings in a clean and dry area out of the weather. Hang them up off the deck, away from heat sources. Coat all slings that are to be stored for an extended length of time with cable lubricant before storage. Load binders are frequently used in the offshore oil industry to secure loads on trucks at the dock and to secure material on the back deck of a vessel heading out to a platform or rig. There are two types of binders found in the offshore environment: the lever-type load binder and the second, the ratchet-type load binder. Any tool can cause serious injury if not used properly. Load binders are no exception. The ratchet type can increase the leverage or pull on the chain over a lever type. They are rated according to the size of chain for which they have been designed. The lever type has a mechanical advantage of 25-1, while the ratchet type has a mechanical advantage of 50-1. When securing a load on the boat deck or on a truck, begin by first donning the appropriate personal safety gear such as gloves, safety glasses, safety shoes, hard hat, and life vest if appropriate. Next, look around at your surroundings, being aware of moving equipment, pinch points, and obstructions, especially if loads are being positioned on a crowded boat deck. Once you are ready to begin tie-down, start inspecting the chain, shackles, bulwark pad eyes, and load binders for wear, bending, cracks, nicks, gouges, deformation, and any signs of welding or heat damage. If signs of damage are present, do not use, discard, and replace. On trucks, hook the load binder to the chain so that you can operate it while standing on the ground. Position the load binder so that its handle can be pulled downward to tighten the chain. Before attaching the binder to a tie-down chain on the back deck of a boat, first take up the slack in the chain, checking the chain path, making sure that there are no kinks that could release suddenly and cause a dangerous slack condition. Attach the binder hook securely to the chain, positioning the handle so that it must be pulled toward you to tighten, with the force of the binder handle going away from you. Keep your face and chin well away in case the handle were to snap back. Do not stand on the cargo when using the load binder. Never exceed the safe working load of any load binder. Most binder manufacturers do not recommend the use of a handle extender, also referred to as a cheater pipe, when sufficient leverage cannot be obtained. If sufficient leverage cannot be obtained using a lever-type load binder, then a ratchet-type load binder should be used to do the job. However, if a handle extender is to be used, it is recommended that a manufactured safety binder bar, now available on the market, be provided for additional leverage to the ratchet handle. They can eliminate much of the slipping and flying off the handle danger of the traditional unsafe hollow pipe extender. Regardless of the type used, a handle extender must closely fit the binder or ratchet handle and should be secured to the handle to prevent it from flying off if the handle is released suddenly. When applying force to pull the binder or ratchet handle towards you, be sure that your feet are secure on the deck, being aware of slip and trip hazards. Keep your back in a straight, neutral posture, and use the muscles in your legs to apply the force, not your back. Never close your hand around the handle on the binder when closing. This can cause you to mash your fingers when it locks down. During and after tightening the chain, check the load binder handle position. Be sure it is in the locked position and that its bottom side touches the chain link. Chain tension may decrease due to load shifting during transport. To be sure the load binder remains in the proper locked position, secure the handle to the chain by wrapping the loose end of the chain around the handle and the tightened chain, or tie the handle to the chain with a soft wire. While en route offshore, the cargo should be checked frequently for loosening, shifting, or spillage. Upon arrival at the offshore destination, which may be at night, all personnel are to don personal safety gear and make sure that there is adequate illumination to work on deck. Before releasing binders, make sure the load is stable and will not topple or roll onto personnel. This applies to both the deck of a boat moving in seas or the bed of a truck being unloaded at the dock. When releasing the load binder, remember there is a great deal of energy stored in the stretched chain. This will cause the load binder handle to move very quickly with great force when it is unlatched. Always release the handle cautiously, keeping body parts such as your hands and face well clear of the path of the handle and any loose chain laying on the handle. Never use your hand, a cheater pipe, or handle extender to release a ratchet handle. Use a steel bar and pry under the handle, staying out of the path of the handle as it moves upward. Keep yourself and everyone working with you well clear of the handle, opening and closing a binder. Offshore, only remove the binder and tie downs on those loads on the boat deck that are to be removed immediately. Be sure not to position yourself between cargo on a moving boat because the cargo can shift at any time. Always have a way out. It is important that all tie downs are completely released before the crane attempts to lift the load. In an offshore environment, there are many forces working on loads that can greatly reduce the capacity of hardware by introducing stresses for which it has not been designed. Wave action can make cargo handling extra dangerous offshore since the crane and rigging are subjected to dynamic loads. Dynamic loads take place when cargo is on deck, attached to a slack hoist line, and the deck quickly falls from under the load, leaving the load hanging in midair and resulting in a shock load. This causes a large jolt to be sent throughout the crane and its rigging. When a load swings out, in, or to the sides, it causes dangerous side loads and increases the radius of the lift, creating additional stress that can cause equipment failure and collapse. It is important to always keep the load directly beneath the hook block and boom head, and when rigging a load for lifting, ensure that it is stable with the center of gravity below the main hook and below the lowest attachment point of the slings. To compensate for the potential of increased shock loading, rapid acceleration, deceleration, and side loading caused by the sea state, an offshore crane's capacity is reduced from a static rating, the capacity of a crane lifting on stable ground, to a dynamic rating, where volatile external forces are possible. Under API 2C, all offshore cranes must be equipped with a dynamic loading chart. All offshore crane lifts to or from boat decks should be considered dynamic, and the crane's dynamic load chart limits should be used. For static lifts at fixed facilities such as a dock, the crane's static load chart limits may be utilized. Now that you have seen how dynamic conditions can affect the rigging process, you can understand why rigging should not be attached to the hook block until the load is completely ready for hoisting. Otherwise, if a load is attached to the crane hook and the boat drops suddenly, the load could rise, swing, and land on top of you in just a matter of seconds. All crane operators and riggers should meet the qualifications set forth in API RP2D. The crane operator is in charge of workboat loading and offloading. If the seas and winds are creating a hazard to the employee, the crane operator should shut down the operation and consult with the OIM or supervisor. The crane operator should know the weights of all lifts to be made to and from the supply boat in order that they do not exceed the capacity of the crane. The crane should be checked out for capacity tolerances and lift clearances prior to commencing loading or offloading procedures. Boat cargo load weights must be confirmed so that no lift is made without certain knowledge of the weight being lifted. If the load weight cannot be verified at the site by reviewing the manifest, equipment load markings, or other means, then the load should not be lifted until it can be confirmed. When items of similar appearance are stored together on a deck, all parties involved in the lift should take care to ensure that the correct item is attached to the crane. All personnel involved in the rigging and lifting procedure should be instructed on the anticipated work plan before the operation commences. All crew members working on the boat deck must wear approved work vests. Crane operators should not allow the load lines to feed out more line than necessary so that load blocks, hooks, spreader bars, and slings will not strike the personnel working on the supply boat decks. One man should not be assigned to work alone on a supply boat deck. At least 2 men should work together with at least one experienced in such work. Personnel working the supply boat decks should remain extremely alert to the crane hoisting assembly above them as well as any load being lifted or lowered. They must always be prepared for the unexpected. Weather conditions that restrict visibility or create high wind factors should be taken into consideration before lifting takes place. Large loads can be blown out of control by high wind gusts, causing side loads on the crane and risking the safety of the men handling the load during lift operations. When the temperature gets below freezing, caution must be exercised to avoid shock loading or striking the crane structure or tackle. Metal can become brittle and fracture. Computing safe working loads of sling angles can be a complicated and time-consuming measure that is not always followed offshore, especially when you're trying to get an awkward load off the boat in 10-foot seas. If you have any doubt as to the safety of the rigging on a particular lift, it is vital to check the capacity of your slings and compute their safe working load at their present angles. Riggers and crew hands on the back of a moving boat deck need to always leave themselves room to maneuver when rigging equipment. A number of deaths offshore have been caused by loads swinging as they are loaded or unloaded on the boat below, crushing deckhands against the bulwarks or equipment already on board. When moving thousands of pounds around, a body offers little resistance to crushing. Keep clear of loads until they have been safely lifted or landed, and never get into a position where you have no place to move. In most cases offshore, slings and other required rigging will be lowered to the boat by the platform's crane. You must carefully remove the slings from the hook block or headache ball before attaching them to a load. A positive trend is for most loads to be already equipped with pre-slung rigging, which is not to be removed. If hooks are being used to secure a load, make sure they are facing outward and not inward. This decreases the chance of the hook slipping out upon lifting and landing. Make sure that your slings are long enough so that you do not have to be on top of a load to attach it to the hook block. Always stand on the deck when attaching rigging to the hook and move out of the way as soon as lifting begins. When you are ready for loading, clear all personnel from the area. Hook the bridle link onto the lift hook, making sure that the safety latch snaps back in place, and as slack is taken up on the load, watch that your hands or feet are not caught in lines being taken up. Always palm loads to prevent fingers from getting stuck in the basket grating. If space allows, grab the tag line, which should be attached to all loads, and help direct the load, keeping it clear of any obstructions. As soon as the load rises above the side rails and other cargo on deck, the captain should move the boat away from under the rising load if possible. Similarly, the crane operator should maneuver the load so that it is not over the boat upon completing his lift. A signalman should be in position on the platform or rig anytime equipment is being transferred by the crane and the crane operator's view is obscured. The signalman is always to be in visual contact with the crane operator. Both the crane operator and signalman should also be in contact with two-way radio communication. Radio communication should be used by the lifting crew members during all lifts to and from boats. The crane operator, riggers, signalman, and boat captain should maintain constant radio contact. If possible, when taking on cargo from the rig or platform, the boat captain should wait till the load has been lowered over the water by the crane operator, then back the boat under the load. Often the boat captain will have more control of positioning the load through placement of the vessel than the crane operator, and can reduce snagging hazards and crushing concerns to the deck crew. The deckhand should grab the tag line and guide the load into position on the deck, again making sure to have room to get out of the way. Never stand, walk, or reach under the load. Do not pull the load drastically to one side or the other, as this could introduce side-loading forces which can decrease the capacity of the crane and boom. Often, blocking is required to stabilize the load and to remove slings. Proper blocking keeps slings from being damaged and reduces the risk of a load toppling or rolling onto your feet when unslung. Pipes should be tied with rope or bound on the ends to prevent them from rolling when unhooked. Quickly detach the sling from the hook block or headache ball. Once the hook is out of the way, you can take your time undoing the rigging if needed. When transporting any hazardous materials, it is the captain's responsibility to make sure that all proper documentation papers and authorizations have been obtained, and that these accompany the materials to its designated facility. Hazardous materials should be marked as such, and all crew members need to be instructed on the proper methods of securing these containers to ensure safe transportation and delivery. In the event of a hazardous waste discharge, immediate action to protect human health and the environment must be taken. Depending upon the characteristics of a load, additional specific precautions may need to be taken when loading certain materials. Extreme caution must be used by roustabouts working on the supply boat during lifting operations. Adequate choking of casing and appropriate consideration of the rolling and pitching motion of the boat must be given in all procedures attempted. Workboats usually bring one size casing per trip. If two sizes are brought on the same boatload, the smaller size should be unloaded and stowed first. The larger size will be used first when the actual casing operations begin, so it should be stowed on top in the rack where it will be readily available. 30-inch casing is transported in single joint loads, while the smaller casing can be transported in doubles. When handling steel plates, consideration should be given to prevent the plates from sliding out of the choked sling and to prevent the sharp edges of the steel from cutting the sling. It is recommended that wooden blocks be positioned at the corners of the steel plate in the path of the sling to protect the slings from being cut. Alternate lifting solutions for steel plate, including a welder burning a hole in the edge of the plate through which a shackle can be attached, or a plate clamp can be used as shown. Extreme caution should be taken when handling steel plates by any method. The loss of a plate from any height can be disastrous. Note wind strength and direction when handling plates. Wind can cause spinning and adverse actions to the plate being transported. Several types of supplies, drilling equipment, and food are often transported to the rig or platform in boxes. Usually, the box will have permanently attached pad eyes in which to connect a set of slings. However, a little extra care has to be given in the handling of a wooden crate. The rigger must be certain that a crate or box is of adequate construction and in good shape for transport. One of the most commonly used shipping containers is the barrel or drum. There are several widely used methods of handling these containers, including barrel hooks and clamps. Probably the safest method for transporting is in a drum or barrel holder that can be pre-rigged and used to transport several barrels at a time. The crane operator and rigging assistant play a key role in safely conducting personnel basket transfers. The crane operator is responsible for making sure that the crane is approved for personnel transfers and for inspecting all of its components thoroughly to determine that the crane is in acceptable operating condition. The personnel basket also needs to be inspected. Under API RP2D, the crane operator, rigger, and a qualified inspector must regularly inspect the personnel basket for damage and defects, such as frayed ropes or cracks in the flotation ring. Before we bring this program to a close, let's tie up any loose ends and recap the essential points you should take into consideration before rigging any load offshore or at the dock. First, know the weight of the load. Second, determine the proper rigging components and hitch required to perform the safest lift possible. Third, thoroughly inspect and check the capacity of your slings and calculate any possible deductions due to sling angles. Subtract the weight of any extra tackle such as spreader bars and hooks. Fourth, make sure the load is properly balanced with its center of gravity directly under the lift hook. Pay attention that you are clear of the load if it begins to swing upon lifting. Always have an escape route. Fifth, provide the crane operator with the appropriate hand signal for the lift operation required. Sixth, upon landing, place blocking if needed, and again make sure you have plenty of room to maneuver if the load should swing. Use the tag line to control and position the load in place. And seventh, undo the rigging, paying close attention that it doesn't snap loose, hitting you in the face, and pat yourself on the back for doing a job well done. Performing the important job of a qualified API RP2D rigger requires a great deal of skill and responsibility. Remember, the lives of you and your coworkers are at stake. By paying strict attention to the job at hand and following the safety guidelines mentioned in this program, you'll be considered a valued professional, respected and rewarded by your employer.